Greetings, friends. Danielle Smith, president of the Alberta Enterprise Group. And this week, we've got a couple of topics for you. We have lined up someone from Samaritan's Purse to tell us what's happening on the ground in Abbotsford, because they are leading the effort to help not only with the flood evacuation and helping people get normalized before they can return to their homes, but they will also be spearheading the effort on the reconstruction. So I wanted to get an update from her to find out how things are going. We'll try to get into that issue every week if we can, with someone who can add value. I hope to have at some point Chris Nash coming on to find out what we're doing about trying to find alternate routes to get goods to market. I gather both CP and CN are back up and running, but man, oh man, those highways, they're going to take a while before they get reconstructed. And we happen to have a lot of road construction expertise within Alberta Enterprise Group. So maybe there'll be a thing or two you can do about it. And as well, we do have a lot of crews that are working on the Trans Mountain pipeline. So I'm interested in knowing how much of that work effort is being repurposed to help get things back on track for our BC friends. So lots to update on. So we'll wait till Tammy joins us. But what we are also going to unravel today, and I hope we don't become unraveled as we talk about it, is the electricity sector, what to expect with the spike and fall in winter prices, which are already occurring, according to my guest, and whether there are some long-term solutions that need to be put into place to try to normalize electricity prices. It is a tough market to understand, and I've done a lot of segments on it over the years. The way I try to simplify thinking about it is that we have to look at it in multiple parts. There's the generators who have a reasonably competitive market, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then there are the distribution and transmission lines, and those are set with regulated rates. And we do have essentially two incumbents, the AltaLink and ATCO. There's a few others that Sheldon will talk about that build out the lines, and they seek approval for increasing rates. And that's where a lot of our discussion is going to be centered around today, is whether that part of the market is working particularly well. And then the final area, of course, is your retail. And we do have a number of retailers, so we've got good competition there. But if the bulk of the cost is regulated and it's escalated beyond what it would be normal, then maybe that's the part of the market that isn't working. So joining me to talk about this is Sheldon Fulton. He has been my go-to over the years in trying to understand the electricity market. I don't know if I explained it particularly well, but I know it took me a long time to understand the various moving parts. My board member, Marlies Lehman, has been doing a lot of work to try to raise the issue of how we are creating a competitive disadvantage now because our power prices are so high, and in particular, the cost of getting it to us with distribution and transmission. And she's got some ideas about how we should address that I'm going to run by you. Sheldon Fulton, of course, was formerly with the Industrial Power Consumers, pardon me, not IPSA, Industrial Power Consumers Association, IPCA, and he is an electricity policy analyst, and he joins me now to talk a few things through. Sheldon, thanks so much for being with me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Danielle. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's begin just by getting your sense of how I introduced is about what the sort of the nature of some of the problems are. I do get the sense that we do have quite robust competition among generators, and we do seem to have some good. That's always good because it can bring prices down. We do have, I suppose, reasonable competition among retailers. The problem does seem to me to be in the middle. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, I'll correct you a little bit in terms of the nature of that competition within the generation sector, because we've had some pretty fundamental changes in the last 2 years, 12 months. And the net effect of that is that we're back into a potential market power control problem with respect to pricing. And if we get a chance, we can have a little bit of a look at that. But there's a number of factors that are contributing to push the price of electricity up. And then that's all exacerbated by how much it costs to get it to you. And both of those are going up. In fact, I found a little surprise. I was analyzing my NMAX bills over the last day in preparation for this, and I found out that the transmission component of my bill doubled. at the beginning of 2021. So it's twice as high as it was last year. And I don't remember anybody saying anything about that, with the promise that I could always have my transmission for the cost of a cup of coffee. So, but it's the way that the whole process works, and you touched on it, that the actual energy component of your bill is relatively minor, and that's as a residential. But think about it if you're a commercial facility or you're a small industrial, and why we got so much activity going on to not only try to manage my my electricity cost, but I'm trying to manage it in terms of getting it to me. And we don't do much of that in Alberta. In fact, most consumer groups have been disenfranchised from the process of intervening. And even when they intervene, they're not treated with much discipline. Like it's you shouldn't really be here. In fact, I got eliminated because I only represented myself. And I'm going, well, I am a consumer of electricity. Why can't I participate? But so they get
and you know what, Sheldon, I should probably do a mea culpa, because I think I'm partly to blame for the fact that we don't have effective consumer intervention anymore. I remember back when I was with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and at the time, the utilities consumer advocate, they were worried. The term they had is that there was a cottage industry of people who were intervening in the process, and they were making the same arguments, and it was duplicating the effort. So why doesn't everybody come together under one umbrella and have a single intervention process, and it'll be fantastic? And so I think I was persuaded by that argument. We moved down that path, and it was the Consumers Association that said, no way, this is going to ultimately result in ineffective intervention, and prices are just going to go up on the regulated lines for distribution and transmission. And by gum, it appears that they're right. So I don't know if you can dial the clock back.
And part of it, I mean, it's that conflict of interest when you have, I mean, the concept of a utility consumer advocate is a valid concept, but if you have it as a part of a ministry of the government, and it starts to raise topics that the government doesn't want raised, who wins? Well, it's pretty easy, and we've seen it at least 3 times within the UCA, where guys that have been there just gave up, got frustrated, says, I can't do this, I'm vacating it. But by that point in time, they were one of only 2 groups in Alberta that were intervening. The industrials were still intervening in terms of IPCA and the Direct Consumers Association, larger industrials that could afford to hire staff to do things, but with no money or limited amount of money in terms of cost recovery, and the UCA. And the UCA was limited in terms of what they could intervene on. And so we're faced now with 25 years after deregulation started in 1996, with most of the industry from a generation perspective put back together again. So, some name changes, but basically 4 companies controlling 70% of the offer stack, and 2 large entities controlling transmission, and distribution entities that kind of get to do whatever they want. And then there's a whole bunch of peripheral charges that get added on to your bill that even I have difficulty understanding, where do they come from? Why would I have something called, both an administration charge as well as a connection charge? They have, they both sound like they do the same thing, but they don't. And some of them are variable by how much I consume, so I can manage them by cutting back. And some of them are not variable. They're just fixed charges. And they have a tendency to go up every year. And then there's the winner one, the riders, the rate riders. I mean, the best named process in the world, where a rate rider is an ability for a utility to demonstrate that it guessed wrong when it set the rates, and now it doesn't have enough money to cover its costs. So will you approve this rate rider so we can charge the consumer some extra money to make up for our failure to forecast accurately what was going on. And rate writers, at sometimes, in my analysis, rate writers were as big as the entire energy component of my bill. Like, I got electricity here, which I've done a lot of stuff at home to reduce my consumption. We've done almost every energy efficiency thing we can. So my energy consumption in 2020 is roughly 50% of what it was in 2006. So I've cut all of that back. My bill is higher than what it was in 2006, significantly, because of all of the extra stuff that gets added on. Anyway, but that's a residential person, and I know.
And we'll talk a bit about why industrial is a bit different, but I think we need almost a
how we
history
protected
lesson.
the industrials through that process. But let's go back a step, because you were right. You got to break it into the component pieces. You can't just understand it at a delivered situation. You have to say, well, what are the current pieces, and what were they when we began this transition 25 years ago? And are we still on the right path?
And I want to try to get a few of the parties out of the crosshairs right off the hop if we can, because oftentimes when I was working more closely with Utilities Consumer Advocate, it'd be the retail companies that were always getting the complaints about them, because there were some aggressive tactics to sign people up for long-term contracts. I think a lot of that has now been alleviated because of, I think it was NMAX really that pioneered the idea that you could sign a contract, but you could opt out within 30 days and there were no penalties. And so I think there was some issues initially when we were on the retail side, but I get the sense those have pretty much been resolved. Am I overselling that?
There's no question that's correct. And I mean, the number of years that have elapsed since we began the deregulation process at the retail level has weeded out those that couldn't survive. And what we're left with is a group of entities that do actively compete for your business. And, I'll put a plug in for those ones. Anybody that hasn't signed a contract should seriously start looking at some contracts. And the longer term and the lower rate you can get, the better you're going to be. But having said that, I'm not going to plug any particular one of them. As you can see with the gray beard, I get the seniors discount, so that's the best one that's out there. But that just provides me with protection on that electricity component. I mean, the interesting part is that what I actually pay for electricity today is fixed, and it hasn't changed in 5 years in my case.
And I'm in the same boat. Last time I talked to you about this, you said, the way things are going, you should lock in on electricity. And I think you said it was still okay to float on gas. Maybe it wasn't you I was talking to at the time.
No,
I do now regret.
And probably an error. You shouldn't have listened to the part about saying floating on gas, because I'm still floating on gas and my gas part of it's gone up. But that's okay, because
we're going to have to do another segment on how we can reduce our gas charges. But I think the point is important here, because there is a regulated rate option. So if you choose not to sign on to a contract, you just get you could sort of just default into this regulated rate option. What I've never liked about that is that it gives the impression, oh, the rate is regulated, I'm protected. And I think about the old dears who never signed a contract before for electricity, and they're now left with the most volatility in their power bills. And I don't know how we bridge that gap. I was talking to one of the individuals who was in this space over the course of the weekend. And they said, there is a solution, just sign a contract. And it's not that easy. It took me a long time to be convinced to sign a contract. And I've been following this pretty closely. And so I don't know if you can just sort of bridge the gap, because I think it's a misnomer to call that a regulated rate, because people do expect that they're going to be protected by government, and they're not.
Yeah, and calling it a regulated rate, as you say, is not a good idea. I sent you some graphs, and let me.
Here, do you want me to pull them up? I can pull them up.
Let's pull them up quickly, if we can. I'm trying to get my mouse to work here. And there's no particular. There was an order to what's there, but let me try to tell the message quickly. So, whenever you're looking at power, you have to look at where were we and where are we headed, and price, like in any good market, is the best bellwether you've got. If you can monitor where prices are, you can get some kind of an idea of what it's going to cost you in the future. So that first graph that's there is my favorite graph, but it's really busy.
It is busy. And there may be people listening to this just on
So I'll
audio only.
explain.
So describe what you see, because it begins in January of 2017 and it comes all the way up to September of 2021. It
Right.
looks like there's a little bit of stability. It even goes down, but then
Yeah.
holy Dinah, starting in November of 2020, it
Yeah.
skyrockets. So tell us what's happening here.
Right. What this is a graph of is what are called the calendar prices. So the market trades, it trades day ahead, it trades monthly contracts, and then it also trades calendar contracts. So a calendar contract is an entire year's worth of electricity, and we trade out roughly 5 years. So the forward curve of 5 years worth of calendar contracts in 2017 would have been calendar 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. And what this was doing was monitoring what's happening to that forward price curve. So it's always 5 years worth of prices. And there's a purple line that goes through it. That's the average of the 5 years. And it goes up and down, and it goes up and down through largely politically influenced changes. So when the capacity market design came in, the forward curve dropped off because it was a perception that the capacity market would supplement the energy price. And then the capacity market dropped up out of it in September 2019. You can see that the curve went back up again. And then as we hit into 2021, one of the first really significant influences came in, which is we gave all the PPAs back to the original owners. So TransAlta got theirs back, ATCO got theirs back, Capital Power got theirs back. And so the PPAs reverted back. And then two things happened as a result of them getting them back. One of them is they started to convert them into gas-based generation as opposed to coal-based. And then secondly, the natural gas price started to pull up fairly significantly in 2021. So as the gas price went up and as you convert coal to gas for electricity generation, the forward prices go up. So on the graph, you can see a red line that goes way up to $90. And historically, we've been between $50 and $60 a megawatt hour.
Let
That
me
$90
translate
one,
some of what you said, and you'll have to correct me on a couple of things, because not everybody may be familiar with the terms that you're
oh,
using.
sorry. Yeah, go
But
ahead.
we used to have a power purchase agreement, and that was and why don't you describe what happened there? The way I think of it is that when they moved from the system that we had before, which was essentially a regulated market, government and government mandated, we had a bunch of these coal plants that were producing at a pretty cheap price, and so essentially they locked in a long-term deal to continue purchasing power at a low rate for what was supposed to be the natural life of that particular plant. That's how I understood it. So
Right.
when you
So
say that those power purchase agreements came to an end, the plants reverted back to the individual company, and now they're converting to gas. That makes sense to me about why you'd see a price spike. Have I got that right?
yeah, so power purchase arrangement as opposed to
Arrangement. Thank you.
agreement, but which meant, I mean, it's subtle, but the difference is that the owner still operated the plant, so TransAlta still ran them, but the person that could sell the energy was someone that was successful at buying that power purchase arrangement for 20 years. So let's, for example, say ENMAX went in and bought a PPA. They had the ability to dispatch the unit, but the unit was still controlled by its original owner. And they were, the longest that they existed was 20 years, so they ended in 2020. So December 31st, 2020, or January 1 of this year, they all reverted back to their original owners. And those owners then could operate them as merchant facilities, so no obligations left. And they could because some of them had already signed contracts with the quote previous government, the NDP government, to convert from coal to gas, and were being paid to do that. The TransAlta immediately started to do that transition, and then Capital Power moved into it. So today, we only got about 2,500 megawatts of pure coal-based generation left. We used to have, just 4 years ago, 6,000 megawatts.
Wow.
But we didn't lose that 3,500. They just are converting to gas. But as they converted
and converting faster, I think, than anybody expected. So for those for whom greenhouse gas emissions reduction is their number one objective, then it's mission accomplished. But this was always the trade-off, is that when you move quickly on retiring assets like this, there's a reinvestment. And so it's going to cause a price spike. So that price spike, the way you've described it, seems legitimate. Maybe painful, but it seems like it's legit.
Well, okay. So remember, I said there was 3 factors of influencing it. So we've only kind of dealt with one of them, which is that conversion to gas, and the ability to the influence, I should say, of natural gas in terms of that price. Let me just get you to slide to the next slide.
Is that the one you want?
Which is essentially the same one, except there's a blue line on there. And what that blue line is that it tracks the price movement over the year from January of 2021 through to current. Okay, so the red line was next year. That's the calendar price for 2022. So if you're looking forward, next year's prices are going to be no less than 9 cents or $90. And remember, there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets added on as a result of other.
Yeah, I should maybe do that conversion, because when we're talking about how the generator produces, it's normally the unit we talk about it is in megawatt hours, right?
Yes.
Or $90 per megawatt hour.
Yes.
And then when it gets translated to your bill, because you don't normally use that much, it's kilowatt hours. Right. And so a price that's $90 per megawatt hour would be 9 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
Right?
And the current price levels, that if you're locked into a contract, you're probably somewhere between 5.5 cents and 6 cents on your contract, which would be $55 to $60, which is essentially where we've been. That's long-term market price for electricity in Alberta, is that 55 to 60 range. We're now moved up to 50% higher than that in terms of the energy component. And then we'll see what happens to the residential in a minute here. But the reason I put the blue line on there is that it ratcheted itself up very quickly. That's what's called the balance of the year contract in 2021. So in January, it was all the rest of the months. In June, it was just whatever months are left. But you can see that it's ratcheted itself up over $110. And it's a pretty good barometer, because the average ISO price, so if we just slide down to the next graph, just do the next one there. The average price in 2021, ISO price, so this is the hourly price of actual electricity, is over $100 or over 10 cents. And it's the first time that it's been over 10 cents since we deregulated. So this
wow.
graph,
and I remember that when we deregulated, there was a lot of consternation, and the government had to step in with subsidies to avoid the sticker shock on people's power bills.
That's that 2000 price. So 2000 was, Enron and, California and every catastrophe you could dream of. And we did step in and legislate the price in 2000. So we didn't actually pay that. But from then on, we always managed to have the hourly price. It went up 2008, 2007, 2008. You can see that it went up pretty significantly, but that was driven by $8 and $9 and $10 natural gas at that time. You can see it was really low in 2016, 2017, and that's because we had really cheap gas, and we were going to do a bunch of different stuff, and there was lots of competition, and PPAs got given back and we had a different government and etc. But this year, 2021 is the first year we've seen the market eclipse that $100 level.
So that is if you have
If
it
you just
locked in.
you get to the next one, that's good because you can see the actual numbers on there. But
Okay,
go ahead.
let me go to the next one. But let
No,
me make a comment.
you're on that next one. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the red bar is 2021.
Yeah, so let me make a comment on that, because if I was looking at this through a political lens, I would say, gosh, when the NDP were in power, prices went down. And then when the UCP gained power, prices have gone up. And in the most recent year, they've gone up dramatically. So you did mention that government made a difference. And I'm wondering, does the NDP have some reason to say, hey, look, we had something in place to protect consumers, and the UCP took that off, and now look at what's happened.
Absolutely. It's going to be, they are going to make hay out of these electricity prices. And we'll see that. I think it's just, scroll down to the next. We're going to flip back and forth between the next two. So go down to the one that's on page 6. Yep, okay. You got it. Okay, so this is from the Market Surveillance Administrators, who's responsible for oversight. And by the way, they've had some of their powers taken away by the government as well, to be able to go in and cause change, which is unfortunate because they were supposed to be, that quasi-legal oversight agency. But that's another discussion another day, Danielle. But let's come back. This is the residential rate option. So just for your listeners' context, I was the independent advisor for ENMAX, EPCOR, and Direct Energy. So 95% of all of the regulated rate that were set from 2001 until 2017, my responsibility was to be oversight on how the procurement took place and what rates were being set, and then sent them off to the AUC. That ended. So now there is no, quote, consumer oversight after 2017, another government decision. And they kind of let those guys do whatever they want. So although they're supposed to do it within a negotiated agreement, but notwithstanding, if we look at this this is from 2016 through to 2021. And the grayed out area in the middle there is when the NDP put in the rate cap. So
I was on the wrong screen. I've gone back to the right screen now. Okay. So regulated rate option, and we're going from January 2016. I'm trying to remember when the NDP got elected. It would have gotten elected in May of 2015.
Yes.
And then October 21st.
And there was no problem with rates. So they put in a rate cap when they really didn't need it because we had some really low rates, but it looked good. And then by 2018, we actually had it implemented, and it was in effect. And then when the current government came in, they did away with it. And so it's gone. You're no longer protected in that regulated rate, but with a rate cap. And you're now subject to whatever rates are published by ENMAX, Direct Energy, and Capital Power, not Capital Power, EPCOR. And whoever else is doing rates. So you can see in there who the rate is set, but the price is delivered by the distributor. So Fortis delivers the EPCOR rates in rural Alberta.
So here's the thing. I've signed on at your advice to a contract. So I think I'm not locked in at, I want to say 6.9 or 5.9 cents a kilowatt hour.
You're probably 5.9 because you've been there for a while. Yeah.
But so those who didn't do that, if I'm looking at this graph, I mean, it looks like they might be paying as much as 14 approaching 15 cents per kilowatt hour on the generation side.
You're ahead. You've jumped ahead. So don't look at the line that goes up and down. That's the pool price.
Okay.
The dotted line is the pool price. The bars, I think the highest it got to was about 12 cents this year. But if we scroll back one graph, this is the residential rate estimates for 2022, or for the next 6 months, basically. and you'll see that they're estimating, this is the MSA that's estimating this, not me. It's estimating it could go as high as 18 cents.
Holy Dinah. 18 cents. So you're talking 3 times what you might be able
Right.
to have gotten if you'd signed on to an earlier contract. And I guess as well as 3 times what the historical
Yeah. So
rate has
anywhere
been for the
from
last 20
double,
years.
exactly, anywhere from double to 3 times. So if you look at where the 12-cent line is, everything from December this year through to March of next year, through this winter, is going to be over 12 cents and could get as high as 18 cents. And
Oh
that's your
my.
regulated rate. That's that government regulations coming into effect, doing nothing for you. Sorry, that was a political comment.
Well, but even still, like, I guess what I'm worried about is that those who, and I totally understand why people would say, why do I need to sign on to a long-term contract for electricity? Totally understand that because I resisted for so long. But when you start seeing those kind of prices in January, February, that when you're using more electricity, people are going to freak out about that. So I don't know. I mean, I tend to like to have government to have a soft touch when it comes to intervening in the market. But this is an extraordinary circumstance. Is there anyone advising that the government go back to the NDP policy of putting in a rate cap? Because it's not just an NDP policy. Ralph Klein did it too.
Yeah, I sort of doubt it, given the political climate that we have today in Alberta. But let's see if we can figure out whether there's other parts of the problem that could be used to fix it. And so one of the things that I had advocated for the entire 15 years that I was independent advisor is that we needed to go longer term in procuring electricity to set the regulated rates. So just scroll back up 3 graphs, sorry, back up to the 5-year curve. That's the one, you got it there. So if you could buy 5-year contracts, so the current 5-year contract is the purple line that's on there. It's about $68, which is kind of ironic because that translates to 6.8 cents, which happens to be where the cap used to be. The 5-year curve is still only at 6.8 cents. Next year is already over 9 cents. And if we said, let's make the regulated rate a function of long-term contracts, and let's spruce those contracts up a little bit by having a certain generation mix. So let's buy from wind and let's buy from solar. By the way, Danielle, wind is now the cheapest electricity production source in Alberta. It's cheaper to produce electricity from wind than any other source that we got in the province. So all those
Which is fantastic if it was able to generate all the time. We still have an intermittency problem with wind.
No, we don't. Yeah, when was the last time that you intermittently were using your electricity in your house?
Well, I look at Alberta, I look at Reliable AB, and they always do an assessment of what our sources of power are. And wind is really only on about 30 to 40% of the time.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead, but TransCanada's got a solution. It's called 24/7 carbon-free power coming from renewable sources. 24/7, whether the wind is blowing or not, whether the sun is shining or not. And there's no reason that everybody in the province shouldn't be capable of buying a block of energy for the next month, shaped according to your house. Why do we price on a 5-minute interval basis? Like, for what purpose? We did it 25 years ago. We did it for dispatching coal-based generators. That's the reason we designed the market we did. We've not changed that design. And as I mentioned, we've only got 2,500 megawatts of coal left. But we price according to a system which was designed to do nothing but dispatch coal generators. And wind, here's the irony, wind and solar combined is 2,400 megawatts. So they're within 100 megawatts of the coal, and we still treat those as you can't price your electricity going into the pool. You take whatever the price is. you're not allowed, and you're non-dispatchable. So you're like negative load. That's the way you're treated. So they take all the load, they subtract the wind, they subtract the solar, and then they say, okay, we'll price the rest of it. Well, the rest of it is for the convenience of those guys that can't ramp up and ramp down. We designed a system to dispatch coal-based generators. We price according to that, and then we fault those guys that can't follow those rules. I can't.
So let me see if I can interpret what you're saying, because I'm not an expert in this field, but what I'm hearing you saying is that there's a certain chunk of electricity that has just been sticky. They just have stayed in the regulated rate option. So treat them as a long-term contract and buy power in the long term the way you would as if you were doing a long-term contract, and then you can negotiate a lower rate. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And if you do that, the other benefit of doing that. So right now we're constrained. These guys can only buy 120 days ahead. That's why those rates that are projected only go to March. And so they set the rate because they're buying into the thick of the market. That's the most expensive power that's there, is whatever's coming up next. And yet there's still low cost power further out. It may be underpriced right now because there's not a lot of demand for it. And so it may go back up. But that's where competition, you talked about competition at the beginning. And yes, there's still competitive companies selling power, but they're not competing at the point of pricing. They're not competing in the hour by hour market any longer, because there's no need for them to do that. And their whole problem is exacerbated by conversion to natural gas. Let's depart from these guys just for a minute. I wanted to
I'm gonna stop sharing.
I want to scroll down to page 7.
Oh, I stopped sharing, but
don't keep sharing.
Keep sharing. But okay, so tell me what we're going to see when I get myself back there.
I want to talk about the second element of what I was just saying, so it makes more sense if we can see this graph.
Okay, and we're going down to slide number 7. Got it.
That's the one. Okay, so this is the power price and the gas price for that same time period, that the last 21 years. So the blue line on there is the ISO power price, month by month. And the orange line on there is the natural gas spot price as traded by the Natural Gas Exchange. And if you look, remember I said that we saw high prices in 2007 and 2008 because of high gas prices. Now the ratio on this screen is 20-1. So an $80 power price, or 8 cent a kilowatt hour price, is equivalent to a $4 gas price. So it's called the conversion is a 20-1 conversion. That's an important number to bear in mind when we start looking at what happened with these conversions. So when we had high gas prices, it pulled the power prices up in 2008, 2009, but the gas prices were a lot higher than the power prices. If we look at the other end of the graph, we look at 2020, 2021, the gas prices have gone up, but they don't account for all of the power price going up. The power price has gone up a lot more than the gas has. And you could ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Which is a really important question. What other factor is in the market beside gas prices? Because the convenient excuse is to say, well, we've got $4 and $5 gas. Well, that's good. I'm happy for all those guys because I own some shares in Cenovus. And so I'm happy with that. But that's not the reason that we're seeing all of this price increase. There are other factors at play. And because of that, that forward curve at going out 4 or 5 years is still lower. It's even though those prices on the gas price are fixing themselves in, we're seeing $3 forward curves instead of $2 forward curves in gas, but we're still seeing reasonable heat rates, reasonable market heat rates. So remember I said that 20-1 ratio, that's called the market heat rate. Take the power price, divide it by the gas price, and that MHR, market heat rate, historically has been 18.9 over the
So
last
I guess here's
20
where
years.
I'm worried is that if we end up seeing these gas prices continue to go up, which again has positive because it does generate a lot of revenue for government and for our industry when it goes up. But if that's a 20-to-1 ratio, if it goes up to $8 per MCF, then you're talking about a 16 cent a kilowatt hour price
What's worse than that?
as kind of a long term.
It's worse than that, Danielle. The current heat rate is 30 times.
Oh my.
And that's the problem.
So now we're talking 24 cents a kilowatt hour if it goes up to $8 an MCF.
That's right. It is that the current heat rates are significantly. I got too many computers that I'm using for other things, but the current heat rates in the marketplace are around 30 times.
Oh dear.
As opposed to historically 20 times. Now,
okay.
Two factors.
So I think I understand where you want to go on the generation side, where if you can sign these long-term contracts and get a mix of all of the different types of generation, then you can keep the rate at an historically low average and not worry about the fluctuations in between. Is that
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to transmission and distribution, because I think that's where the real problem is, because that's the other side of it. Is part of the reason you want to keep your transmission and distribution costs low is because from time to time you do end up with these spikes on the generation side. And I think when we last spoke, and I've talked to a couple of energy experts, so please tell me if I'm misquoting you, if I'm quoting somebody else. The problem that we're now seeing with our power bills is that can I stop sharing? Is there anything more you want me to show here, or can I stop?
I'm just scrolling down. I think there was. You can stop sharing for the moment. We're going to talk about carbon, I think.
Yes, definitely. So let me just talk about transmission for a minute.
But let's talk transmission.
Because here's the way I'm looking at this is that in a normal market, you would expect, and I don't know if these numbers are accurate anymore, you would expect that your power cost would be 80% of your bill, and the cost to get it to you, the transmission and distribution lines, would be 20% of your bill. We've got a reverse where the cost of generating power is 20%, and then it's massively expensive for transmission and distribution. And maybe some of that is unavoidable because when you start adding on smaller distributed units for wind and solar and geothermal and small hydro, you're just going to have to build more lines, so it's going to cost more. But is there some fundamental problem that we have in how we're assessing and regulating transmission and distribution costs that have caused such an enormous spike in that part of the bill?
And you let a whole bunch of people off the hook too quickly there, Danielle.
Okay.
So first off, we did a major build in transmission in this province in between 2009 and 2012, essentially. And Danielle, if you remember, that's when we first encountered each other, was talking about this massive transmission build that we're going to do.
I remember it well. There was an eastern transmission line and there was a western transmission line, and we felt like we had to balance them out, and they were DC lines, and there were a bunch of substations, and there was a discussion about, oh my gosh, we've got so much cheap power, maybe we can export it down to the United States. It was a heady time, but it was also a very expensive time.
So, and $15 billion later. And $4 billion of that was in those two HVDC lines, which seldom get used because they don't go from where the power is now being generated to where it's needed.
Let me pause you so you can restate that.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say that they rarely get used?
Well, they're limited in terms of their use because every time you use them, you have a line loss. You're converting your electricity from AC to DC, and then you pump it through there, and then you convert it back to AC. And so if you use them on just a regular basis, when you've got lots of capacity on your existing AC transmission capability, you're incurring an extra cost. And it's almost impossible. I tried for 2 days to pull data off of the ISO website on how much their utilization actually is. And you can't get it. They won't give it to you. Which tells you that it's an issue. But when they were trying to convince everybody we needed transmission lines, they were more than willing to share utilization data. Now they won't share that utilization data. And the reason is because we built transmission all over the place. not necessarily where it needed to be. We did a lot of transmission in southern Alberta, a lot of transmission projects in southern Alberta. And we built capability between Edmonton and Calgary, essentially, or the Highway 16 and Trans-Canada, where there's not a lot of demand for it. We're shutting coal plants down. We're reducing it. All of these conversions that are taking place are basically occurring in Lake Wabamun. The generators aren't moving their facilities because that's where the transmission is, and there's lots of transmission capacity. But here's the part that bothers me with respect to it. If I'm Amazon and I do a 600 megawatt solar facility by Vulcan, and I connect it into the grid, how much does Amazon pay in transmission costs?
Well,
I'll give you a hint.
they should pay.
Starts with a Z.
They pay zero?
Yeah, they don't pay for transmission on anything coming out of there. They only pay transmission at their facilities, the same as any other industrial does. So anybody can build. They pay a transmission connection to the grid, but once that connection is done, there is no portion of the transmission charge that goes to the generators. We connect all generators wherever they are, anywhere in the province for free, or not for free, but we treat them all equally. We don't even charge them extra if they go someplace where there are no transmission lines.
Now, I want to underscore this point because
we did that in 2005.
And I remember the story because you tell me a lot of stories. So this was when Murray Smith was the energy minister, and there was a proposal on the table that instead of making the consumer pay 100% of the cost flowed through on their bill, it would be 50-50 split. And the reason for that, if I can argue it, and you can tell me if my reasoning is right, the reason for that is there's probably a couple of them, but the most important would be that then you would end up with siting decisions made in a prudent way, that you would end up with the generator saying, if I have to bear 50% of the cost, I'm going to try to site my project as close to existing infrastructure as I can, rather than essentially just building out in an empty field and making the consumer pay the cost of hooking me up. And so you would have created a dynamic where you would have built the transmission in the right place at the right size for the right purpose, as opposed to overbuilding.
Well, you also remember transmission includes ancillary services, which is the support services to the system. Consumers pay $150 million a year for these ancillary services, most of which are to allow coal plants to ramp up and down, and to buffer wind when it drops off really quickly, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the support services for the system, which are all paid for by the consumer, now would be having to be paid partially by the generator. So in terms of if I need to put in a wind facility and I need to be able to moderate what I do in terms of meeting some obligations for the rest of the transmission system, I'm going to now make that investment. That doesn't happen. They're not required to. And we pick up the tab for that. We being, unfortunately, only 2/3 of the consumers in this province. Okay, there's a third of the consumers, 30%. I'll be more precise. 30% of the consumers don't pay transmission on what they consume. 70% pay it. And that 30% that doesn't are the guys that build their own on-site generation and meet their own obligations. Industrial guys that I used to represent. By the way, I fought that battle, and we were helped fight that battle, I should say, and we were capable of winning. We managed to have reason bear out that why should I pay for transmission if I'm not using it? And that's got to be the most obvious question that anybody should ask. Why should I pay for something if I don't use it? In the utility business, you pay whether you use it or not. If you look at your bill, the fixed charges on your bill don't go down at all if you cut your usage in half. In fact, they go up every year by at least the rate of inflation. for some reason, even though nobody's connected anything new to my house for 25 years. We don't have any discipline in the marketplace. The other real plus, remember we talked about oversight. If I'm a big company like Amazon and I want to be able to connect and I pay transmission charges, you can be certain that I'm going to be looking over the guy's shoulder saying, do you really need to spend all that money? Do we need some oversight with respect to it? The biggest group that got disenfranchised in looking over the shoulder was the guys in the SAGD gas, Fort McMurray, because we just did our own thing. And didn't need to worry about it from that perspective. So go back to transmission, lots of problems, like why do we have two transmission companies? Why don't they compete with each other to provide services if we've got two of them? And they'll tell you, well, that would be inefficient. Well, you can't get much more inefficient than having 30% utilization on assets. Why do they get a guaranteed cost of capital return on 35% of their assets when they're not at risk? They don't take any risk. When we first were involved in this whole process, one of the things that I had suggested was let's move to a 90-10 model, 90% debt financing, 10% equity. So you can get a return on capital on 10%, but 90% of it, we're going to do what everybody else in the world does, which is sell bonds. And if I did a calculation, if we'd sold bonds for 25% of that $16 billion build 10 years ago and locked them in for 2.5% interest rates instead of an after-tax rate of return of 8.5% on $4 billion, we would be saving $250 million a year for 10 years. That's $2.5 billion that we would have saved just by financing using low-cost debt, which everybody else does.
So let me ask you this, because oftentimes when you raise these issues with the minister responsible, they'll say, oh, this is now independent. I have no role here. This is determined by the regulator. What you've just described, though, sounds to me very much like a political decision that
Absolutely.
You could say we're going to finance these things differently so that we can amortize the cost of them over a longer period of time at a lower rate so we can bring down the cost on the power bills for the construction costs. Is that a political decision or is that a regulator decision?
It's a political decision. I mean, the regulator already said, I can't decide on that because I'm being told that I have to live with the regulations and I have to live with the act. And the act doesn't tell me that I can do that. So therefore, it's obviously a political decision. And it's not a hard change. I mean, the percentage allowance for cost of capital for new projects, all you got to do is basically say to them, look, we're just going to reduce it. You get 90-10. You got to finance 90% from debt, 10% from cost of capital, and you'll be able to get your 9.5% rate of return or 8% rate of return on that 10%. I mean, think how happy Warren Buffett is that we've done what we've done, because he's
wondering why he had such an interest in buying AltaLink.
Yeah, I mean, because it flows to him and it's guaranteed, and it's guaranteed whether you use it or not. I mean, where else can you get that kind of a return on your money? So why aren't those $4 billion in bonds sold? It's ironic because there's 4 million people in Alberta, roughly. Everybody could have had a $1,000 bond supporting their transmission build, paying 2.5% coupon rate a year. You get $25 a year from your bond. And it would look good politically. I mean, it just, you don't need to have the government financing it. You have the population financing it. And that payment goes back out to them. Now they're paying from, my doubling of my transmission costs, which I just found out about. But no matter. I mean, we look at carbon tax as kind of the big evil that's out there, but there's a rebate system. So you pay the carbon tax and you get some of it back. It's not very directly linked. But conceptually, it's how you sell it politically. And I don't like carbon taxes, and I would never advocate for one. But it's a mechanism that's there. On my tax return, I get money back. I just found out that I paid $260 in carbon taxes last year, or this year, 2021. And it turns out that that's, half of what I got back. So it works out. But we should be doing the same thing in financing our utilities. And we used to do that in Alberta, and a lot of jurisdictions used to do it, is you would pay a coupon back out to the population that supports the development of those projects. So two different solutions we could look at. If we're still going to charge the so-called 65% or 70% of the customers for it, at least allow them a benefit with respect to it. Because we've already said to the 30% industrials, you go ahead, build your, SAGD, build your cogen, and you don't need to pay transmission. Well, let's see if we can.
Which actually, as you think about it, that kind of makes sense, because if you're building on site and you're using distribution lines, why should you pay for transmission?
Right. Except the government just came out with an announcement. The new Minister of Electricity, not the Minister of Energy, but the Minister of Natural Gas, McNally, I think his name is.
It's Minister Dale Nally.
Dale Nally, right. And he came out with what I thought was a good program till I dug into the details, which says, well, we're going to allow other people to do their own renewable projects, including keeping the offsets, which is a plus. That's better than any other jurisdiction. But we're still going to charge them transmission. We're not going to do a transmission offset because it, quote, wouldn't be fair to the rest of the consumers. And I'm going, well, that's hypocrisy defined. I mean, you can't.
Because you can't say that we're making that exception for the 30% of the guys who can produce really big power projects on site, but we're gonna stick it to you if you manage to put a few solar panels on your roof.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that seems to be a problem.
You kind of go, why? Like, what's the plus there? Anyway, we're gonna
maybe the why is that because we've got this funding arrangement of all of this now legacy transmission cost that needs to be paid for, you have to find a way to pay for that. But you've offered an alternative solution there. I'm assuming this would be the solution, that you'd convert some of that sunk cost to long-term debt so that you could have a lower rate on it. And you'd be able to do this immediately, wouldn't you?
Sure. You'd have some unhappy shareholders from companies and probably some lawsuits, but that's never stopped anybody before. If you got
but you could do it on a go forward. Then you could say, fine, we had this certain deal.
You do it historically. I mean, why would you want to not buy the current asset? I mean, if you looked at two changes, one of them is starting to charge generators for transmission, and the old excuse of the people.
Can I just pause you there, because there's two different types of generators we're talking about here, and I feel like we're intermingling them. If a big company establishes a 300 megawatt power plant for their own uses in their oil sands or SAGD operation, that's different than somebody who is establishing a solar or a wind farm so they can sell to the general public in the grid. Because by definition, if you're selling to the general public through the grid, you need both distribution and transmission. So I want to make sure that we're talking about two different systems here, right?
Right. Yes. I mean, there's the behind the fence generation, which you're consuming. But, if I put solar panels on my house, I'm, quote, behind my fence. Why do I still have to pay transmission? Ironically, I can actually produce more than I need, sell that to the grid, and I still pay transmission, even though it's going out in the other direction. But just think on two different things. So look at some long-term financing for the existing infrastructure, and look at converting back to 50-50. All generators pick up 50% of the cost. Now I've got a new discipline looking at reducing those costs and more efficient locations for where it's going to occur. And I'm including the guys that are converting facilities to gas up in the Lake Wabamun area, who are already, gotten connected and all the rest of it. But is that, in fact, the best place to be locating gas-based generation, particularly when that gas is an operational heat rate somewhere between 12 and 13 times? And if I build a combined cycle facility like Shepherd here at Calgary, it's only 6 to 7 times. It's almost half as much gas to produce 1 megawatt hour. And that's really important for two reasons. Gas prices are going up, and the carbon content of a combined cycle is less than 0.4 tons. Carbon content for a converted coal facility is 0.66 tons. It's greater than the provincial averages, which is 0.57. There's a chart you'll see coming. We're not going to get to time for it.
I know we always run out of time, but let me run a couple more things by you, because I feel like we've got some good solutions here. But one of the other solutions that has been put forward is, do we need to reduce that regulated rate of return? You said that it's 8.5% on equity. One of the proposals has been, is anyone getting that these days? Should it actually be reduced to 6.5% or even lower? Or is your solution a bit more elegant, saying, fine, you can keep your return on equity, but we're going to finance long-term on debt at a lower rate?
Yeah, so it's awfully hard to argue why one should reduce that cost of capital. And remember, that's an after-tax cost of capital, so you got to factor the tax rate in. So when you're saying 6, it's actually closer to 9. But debt is a interest is a tax deductible item. But let's go back to you could fight that one, but that's not going to do it. I mean, you might get a 0.5 percentage point, but it's the debt equity ratio that's allowed, and the debt equity ratio should be a function of risk, and the cost of capital rate that you get should be a function of risk. But there's no risk. So if you want to create risk for them, I'm happy with that. Make them compete, which is the third potential solution. And I'm saying make them compete all the way from transmission through distribution. So let's get the big box guys, the Amazons, to not only compete in terms of your electricity retail rate, but the delivered cost of that. Amazon is amazing in terms of how they can do delivery so efficiently. We could order something today and have it delivered tomorrow. And how do they do that? Well, why don't we put that kind of competitive intelligence into this area? And think bandwidths, Danielle. Just think bandwidths. We do it in the telecom. We do it in the internet interconnected area. We auction off that. So if I want to finance these transmission companies, let them auction off their capacity. And a new player comes in and buys that capacity, both distribution and transmission, and require them to auction it, 10-year auctions, 15-year auctions, whatever it is. Canada pioneered auctions for the airwaves, and then other countries reflected on what Canada was doing and said, fine, we're going to go that route. And the fights that they have in those areas, but it works. It allows competition to come into it without having to build duplicate infrastructure. So why do we want duplicate infrastructure? And
let me ask you about one more thing, because what I like about your proposal for the financing is that once something's paid off, it should come out of the charge going forward to consumers. Like, why are we paying for lines over and over and over again? Do they ever come out of the rate base?
No, well, you know what they do, though? Your lady had it right. AltaGas just sells the facility to somebody else for $130 million, and it goes into rate base at $130 million because that's what they paid for it. That's what they do, is they sell assets to each other to keep it in rate base, even though it's already paid for. It's ours. We paid for it. Why are you selling it to somebody?
Well, it's a good question. So is that, again, a ministerial decision or a regulator decision? Would the minister have to jump in and make a change there?
It's the minister. Our regulator can only do what they're allowed to do, and they're constrained. And it's all been constrained. I shouldn't say that. There are pieces of the Electric Utility Act that have never been implemented, that should have been implemented, that deal specifically with competition, and they just get ignored. You can ask the minister, you can ask the Department of Electricity or Energy or whatever they call themselves, and they've never been implemented. How do you have an act that's never been turned into regulations that the average person should be able to take benefits from? Well, the reason is because that's controlled by the vested interests. And I hesitate to use that term, but there's no benefit to them having it change. So what's the easiest way to protect it? Well, let's just get rid of all these guys that squeak. I mean, because we don't want squeaky people.
One last thing I want to ask you about. Do you know what I would like? I would like for us to have a real rate all in. If it costs 29 cents a kilowatt hour, truly all in for my electricity, fair enough. But when I turn off my lights, I want it to go to zero. That's the thing that drives me crazy. I've got a condo up in Edmonton that I'm not in because I'm in the middle of renovations on it. And I'm still paying, $20, $30 a month for it, even though I'm not using any electricity because of all of the fixed charges. Why can't we have a system where it's use it and pay for it rather than you pay regardless?
It should be. That's what I was saying in terms of Amazon. I mean, as a utilization type situation, I don't pay anything to Amazon if I don't use their services. If I use their services, I pay, and I pay it as part of whatever I'm acquiring with respect to it. It's not a separate charge that they get to add on. And that model works, and it creates competition, and it forces economic and efficient investment, neither of which we get with respect to it. It's a shame we didn't get to talk about carbon.
You know what? I'm going to have you back to talk about carbon. But thank you so much. I always love talking to you about electricity. I learned so much, and I appreciate your time today.
Okay.
Thank you. That was Sheldon Fulton. He has been a longtime advisor to me on electricity prices. And as you can see, big changes that he would propose that need to take place. And he's been proposing them for a long time. So, Marlea, we will write a letter to the minister and see if we can resolve some of that, because it sounds like it does require some ministerial intervention. All right. One more thing I wanted to check in on is Tammy Suter. She's Canadian Disaster Relief Manager for Samaritan's Purse. We just discovered that she is the person on the ground in Abbotsford coordinating the relief response there. And I wanted to get a sense of where things are at and what kind of help they need. I know that we have, not only among our membership, but also, of course, among private individuals, such a willingness to help our friends in BC. In Calgary and southern Alberta, we suffered massive floods, as we did up in Fort McMurray. So we've got a lot of personal experience going through what everybody's going through right now. And so, Tammy, we want to know what we can do to help. So give us a sense of where things are at with Samaritan's Purse. You've been called in, and tell us what you're doing on the ground.
Yeah, well, we're thanks for having me this morning. We're filling a few capacities right now. The first thing that we were asked was to just help with some group lodging, as people have been displaced either from road systems not being able to get home, or those people that have been displaced from their homes because of the floodwaters. And so we kind of got those two groups of people in that TradeX center right now. That is going really well. It's up and running. The team is taking really good care of people there. Emergency Social Services from the city of Abbotsford is partnering with us there. We're supporting them, and they're doing an excellent job caring for those people. So we've heard lots of great things, that they feel safe there, they're comfortable. Salvation Army has been doing the food there. And so it's really been a joint effort with a lot of people to do that part of it. Yesterday morning, my trucks, we have a 53-foot trailer that's coming out here. In the front of it is the command post. I know you would have seen it in the 2013 floods in High River, but it's coming out here. It should arrive. It's arriving today, probably at 1 o'clock today, 1:30. And we'll start setting up at a Northview Community Church. That's where we'll have our command center. And then we're going to start early next week, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, with volunteers to start going into the homes and start mudding out and starting to get people back to a place where they can hopefully rebuild and get cleaned up.
Holy cow, that's happening already next week. Because I wasn't sure, because sometimes it can take quite a bit of delay before residents are allowed to return. But is that your sense, is that you're going to be allowed in as early as next week?
Yeah, there's some places. The city is, I just have to say, the city has actually done a really great job. I've been in the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center, and they've really been working hard to get things up and running again and get people back in. Now, it's a phased entry. We're in an atmospheric river again till Friday here. I looked out the window here of my hotel this morning, and it's pouring rain. So we're just, things. They haven't lifted the evac orders for that Sumas Prairies fully yet, because they're still doing their assessments there for the bridges and road systems. And as they're doing that, they're also looking at the homes and doing the assessments on the homes. And then depending on what happens with this this weather system that's setting in, they didn't want to put people back in their homes and then have to pull them right back out again. That's such a traumatic experience. And so just trying to find that balance of, okay, is this, are we good? Are we in the clear? They've done a lot of work. They've built their berms to keep that stuff safe again. And so is this rain going to affect that, or is it not? And so I think by, tomorrow and Friday, we'll have a good sense of what that looks like. And I think, they're trying to get those evac orders lifted. Now, the bottom of the lake is still full of water in that bottom area. And so those people aren't going to get home yet. But as they start lifting those orders, moving into that lake bottom, then we can start getting in and start helping people clean up.
So where are the homes that need to be mucked out? Is it, Merritt obviously was well underwater, but tell me the municipalities that are impacted and how many homes are you looking at?
Yeah, so that's just a snippet of Abbotsford, just because I'm here. I also have a team that is leaving Saturday morning to go to Merritt. I have been in contact and talking daily with the city there. And so our team leaves Saturday morning and will arrive Saturday night into Merritt, setting up again Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to hopefully start with volunteers on Tuesday. Now, that's also going to depend on evac orders being lifted. Right now, they've done their phase 1 and they've allowed their phase 1 people back into their homes. They had a whole water issue, sanitation issue that was there that they've been working hard to try and fix and get things cleaned out so that people can get back in. So by the end of this week, the thought was that they were working towards having phase 2 lifted for evac orders. And then next week, phase 3 is where all the flooding happened. And they're hoping to start to lift that, I think, early next week sometime. I don't know the exact timeframes on that. But we're wanting to be there in time again so that when those evac orders are lifted, we can start doing some mud outs and get people's homes cleaned up as well.
That's fantastic, because I've been worried that if we don't start seeing those basements mudded out and you get into winter freeze, then those homes are going to be ruined.
Yeah, and you know what? That is the challenge up in Merritt. It's winter out there. It's cold. And so even for us, we typically come with a lot of equipment. We have our disaster relief unit, we have shower trailers, we have cook trailers, we have RVs, and we set up our senior team in that. And then we put volunteers in the churches and we feed them and we go out and we serve in that community. I just got off a pastor's meeting with the pastors in Merritt, and we're having to be a little bit more creative in how we're serving the community this time. So our truck is going up there, and all our tools and all that kind of stuff is going up. But we can't house people the same way that we have in the past. So there's churches in Kamloops that have already also reached out to us and want to send teams up. So, our office is working with them, and we're trying to have this coordinated effort so that we can really do a good job serving the residents of Merritt and try to help them get cleaned up.
How would people assist in the best possible way? I mean, I took a look at the drive, and it'd be 9 hours and 28 minutes from where I am, and I'm not even sure how easy it is to get through. I don't know if you'd be letting a caravan of volunteers get through, or are you going to get your volunteers by flying into Vancouver and then driving them out? What's the process of getting all the people there?
Yeah, well, again, we're trying to look at that. Again, overnight is not really an option because there's no, there's smaller churches. I mean, that's typically where we set up just because, we can turn classrooms into sleeping areas and stuff like that. We can't have our shower trailer out there because it's freezing. And so we're really going to be relying on more local radius for us anyways, and the churches. They've already band together. They have people from the city of Merritt who have already signed up to say, hey, I want to help. I want to help mud this out. So when this starts, we have a whole list of people already. And then if you go out towards Kamloops, which is only an hour drive, and in those areas, there's also a whole host of people that have said, hey, we're putting our hands up. We want to come help. Just let us know what that looks like. So we're trying to coordinate with those churches and groups to say, you guys, bring 20 people out on this day, and you guys bring 50 people out on this day, whatever that looks like. And then they can go home and we're still able to do what we need to do in community.
Are you going to have enough people? I mean, one of the things I remember from both the Calgary and the High River experience is that Calgary was able to get theirs done quickly, but there was only one portion of the city that was impacted, about a tenth of the population. So you've got access to 1 million people or more who can come in and help if they're so motivated. And then High River went second. And so you had all these folks who were already trained up about how to do this efficiently, able to come down. And it was only a 45-minute drive. So you're right. You could have a staging area. I'm worried that you're not going to have the volume of people to be able to help. Can you put my mind at ease there?
Yeah, I hope I can. There's other organizations that are working with us as well. And so Christian Aid Ministry, that is a Mennonite group, we've already been in connection with them. They are coming to assist us as well. And they have people in the area so they can house their own team. So we don't have to try and house them. They are an incredible workforce. And we always love partnering with them. So we kind of take care of lots of the admin stuff, getting the work orders, doing all that kind of stuff. And then we say, okay, here's, these houses, you guys go to work on them. And so it's a really beautiful partnership. There's another organization called Christian Disaster Relief. They were here at the TradeX and met with me yesterday. They are also going to Merritt. And they're going to head there for next week. So that's another group that is going to be working with us. The Rotary Club has already contacted us and said, hey, we've got groups of people that are ready to volunteer as soon as we kind of get this organized and get them, get homes assessed and get people in them. So I don't think we're going to be short. I think that there is a lot of people banding together for this. And I think, people are seeing the need. And they're stepping up, and that's really, really impressive.
No kidding. Okay, so if there is a group who are in Alberta that want to help, what would be your advice to them? It sounds like, from hearing you, it's kind of tap into one of those existing organizations that has the network and the ability to house and feed them so that they can have a staging area to be able to go in and out.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, you can always go to our website at samaritans.ca, and we have a volunteer page on there for BC. It's labeled for BC, and it has, all the responses that we're doing right now in BC. And, if there was a group, they can call my colleague Katrina, and she's the one kind of putting all of that together. And so if there was a group from Calgary or whatever, and they say, okay, we're going to stay in Kamloops, but we're going to come and we're going to be able to drive every day to come and work with you, we can schedule those guys in. There is not a problem with that. The only hiccup is just being able to house people close into the Merritt area, just because there's not a lot of capacity to do that right now.
Are there any RV parks that are open? That's the other way I was thinking that people could efficiently.
Not that I know of. Winter again with water lines and stuff becomes an issue. Bathrooms out in the cold. This is stuff. We're used to doing this kind of work in the spring and summer.
Absolutely.
We spent all summer in BC already working with the wildfires, and so we've been in BC almost all year this year. So my heart really goes out to the residents of BC. This is some of these folks have been evacuated 2 and 3 times already. And it's really, really hard to be evacuated so many times and to be, in limbo land. It's a really hard place to be for people. So
completely. Okay. So if people are not able to tap into some of your volunteer efforts for some of the reasons that we mentioned, what is it? What is the need right now? I mean, I know that there's always, some desire to try to give something. And so people go rummage around saying, I can give some of these old clothes to people, but that often isn't the best way of being able to support your groups. Dollars are always probably welcome, but give me some sense. Are there any high priority contributions people can make? Is it dollars? Like, give us a sense of what it is that you need.
Yeah, I think, from one of the perspectives, I mean, always, it's hard because people don't feel like they're actually doing something when they do a donation. But those are really important because organizations like ours or Rotary or, these other organizations, Salvation Army, they're boots on the ground and they're working hard around the clock to support these folks. And, for us, the mud outs and stuff like that is one part of what we do. But we have a whole long-term recovery arm to the organization as well. And that, recovery is you know, 2 to 10 years for people. It's not short term. And that's what people forget, is that, okay, it's in the news, everybody's thinking about it, I want to do something right now, but there's going to be a lot of needs that are going to be coming up in the times to come. And, you know, for whatever reason, if people don't have insurance and they can't, you know, they're having a hard time getting their house put back together, what are some of the needs, you know, maybe coming up, you know, as people can, you know, you talked about freezing, you know, that's going to be an issue for people. And what's going to happen in their homes as we're tearing insulation out to get it out of the homes? Well, you got to let it dry out a little bit before you can start to put that stuff back in, but it's freezing at night. And so there's a whole, the issues are just astronomical when you start to think about what this might entail. And, you know, how do we get them dried out? How do we get heaters? How do we do, you know, some of this kind of stuff? So I think that there's other things that people could be thinking of if they can connect with some of the organizations that they choose to support that are working in the area. Again, you know, I was just telling the pastors, we're going to have to be creative on this one, on how we make this happen and how we can best serve the communities. And we gotta all be thinking out of the box.
Completely. Is there some hope that you would get? Is there some target for doing that initial work of the mudding out? Is that something that you hope would get taken place and complete before the end of the year, or is that too optimistic?
You know, I'm an optimistic person, so I'm always a half glass full kind of gal. So, I mean, my goal, best case scenario, if we can get the volunteers in place, I would hope to be done the mud out side of things, the cleanup side, by Christmas time. If not, I mean, we have committed to go back. You know, we're not going to leave it half done. So if we don't happen to get that done before Christmas, then we will go back after Christmas and finish it up. I would hope to be done hopefully the middle of January or something like that, if all goes well. But I think with some of these powerhouse teams that we're partnered with and working with, organizations and volunteers, those kinds of, you know, church community volunteers and stuff like that, I'm really hoping that you know, we can all band together and we can get this done before Christmas for residents, so that they can start thinking about, okay, how do I start moving forward now?
Completely. Oh, I love the work that you're doing. Thanks so much. I'll probably want to do a check-in with you as you go forward to see if you're needing any additional help to be able to meet that timeline. I know you are so busy doing things on the ground. Give me some idea though, just before I let you go, how many homes are in this state that need to have this urgent work done?
Are you asking for Abbotsford or for Merritt?
For both.
For both? Thousands.
It is thousands.
Yeah.
How many is it in Abbotsford? It sounds like you might know those numbers a little bit more.
I have an idea of both. So you're probably, I mean, I think we would be anywhere from 600 to 1,000 homes in Abbotsford minimum.
Yeah.
And in Merritt, I think you're going to be, I think you're around, you know, they're tagged different levels, green, yellow, red, you know, depending on the severity of damage on that. But I think you're probably around the 600 or 700 homes affected in Merritt as well, with varying degrees of damage. And so, you know, there's a lot in the green, but there's probably almost 300 that are in the yellow. And those are the major concerns that we're going to have getting those things.
Well, I'm glad to hear those numbers, because you may recall that in High River, 90% of the homes were in that yellow or red category with the flooding. So I think we were looking at more like 4,000 or 4,300 homes. Yeah. So it does. I see now why you have some optimism that you got this. Well, anything we can do to help, let me know. I'll make sure that we post this video so that people know how to be in touch with you. And it does sound like it's through your website for Samaritan's Purse. If people want to volunteer or give a contribution. Are you also doing updates there as well?
We are. We're trying to keep our website as up to date as possible. So we'll try and keep those stories coming in and let people know what things are looking like.
Fantastic. Love the work you do. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. That's Tammy Suter. She is with Samaritan's Purse, and she is the person on the ground trying to lead the recovery effort in Abbotsford and Merritt. That makes me feel a whole lot better. Know that it's 600 to 1,000 homes in Abbotsford, about the same in Merritt, and that they've got crews of people from a variety of different organizations. You heard the names of a bunch of them. If you want to help, you can tap in that way. And I'll also post something so that you know how you can contribute. We'll try to continue to do an update with them, because it looks like that's a pretty aggressive timeline, trying to get things back in order for those families in time for Christmas. And of course, as we know from what we saw in Calgary and southern Alberta, it takes a lot longer to get back to normal. I will try to also do an update on what's happening on the trucking and transportation side, and we'll see if we can continue to support our friends in British Columbia. I'm Danielle Smith. I'm president of the Alberta Enterprise Group. We'll be back at this again next week. Thanks for tuning in.